I just don't think the schooling system is set up in the right way to incorporate the neurodivergent people. Would you?
I totally agree. I agree with that. I think, the school that our kids go to is good. It is very good at giving accommodations and things to kids who are neurodivergent. But I think our education system very much is about memory. It's about passing exams. And for quite a lot of people who are neurodivergent, me included, working memory is an issue. So any rote learning is never going to be good. And I think especially when you look at the world we live in now, our education system, like you want to find out anything now, you can go onto Google or you can go on to ChatGPT and you've got it in, you've got it in 20 minutes kind of thing. But our education system is very much geared towards being good with numbers and being good with words, being good at maths and good at English. And I think if you stray from that in any way, and I actually think that one of the biggest challenges neurodivergent people have is, as children, we form our beliefs based on what we experience. And so if you're going through the education system and you're subtly getting messages that you're not good enough, then that's what stays with you. And that one of the experiences that I had when I first started my coaching business, I was doing work on beliefs. So I think it was maybe the first week we were there, they had a flip chart, and they pull over the flip chart. And what it said was, the way we think impacts how we feel, which affects our actions and therefore our outcomes. And I remember I read it and I reread it and I'm like, oh my God, how could I not know this? If I want to change my life, I've got to change the way I'm thinking. So I started exploring some of the beliefs, and I came to realise that one of the fundamental beliefs that I had was that I wasn't smart enough. So I was like, right, where does this come from? And I had this really clear picture in my mind. And it was me in either primary 1 or primary 2, because I know what classroom it was and I know what teacher it was. And I only had that teacher, P1 and P2. And I was sitting at my desk and I remember looking, and my best friend was in a reading group and she was in a better reading group than me, a higher reading group. And so I took that to mean she was smarter than me. And literally that belief, like based on this tiny snapshot, had gone with me through my whole career. And the problem is, when we are building beliefs about ourselves, that's that, quite often it's like 0 to 7, you're starting to build beliefs. And your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, rational part of your brain, it doesn't start to form till about puberty, and it's not fully formed until you're about, I think, mid-20s. But that means that we are forming beliefs about ourselves at a point we can't really challenge them. And that's why when you actually kind of explore your beliefs, often they're very simplistic, because actually they're still in almost like our child language. Yeah. And, when I started to really explore this, and it's like, right, you're not really smart enough. So, like, look at the evidence, and you go, oh, well, I had a pretty successful career. I managed a team, we built our own business. I then retrained as a coach, and you start to look at it and you go, right, let's just be objective here. And you start to see, well, that's not even true. Yeah. I'm not smart enough. And so I think that's why our education system is so influential on children, and that where self-esteem is impacted, that to me is actually the most harmful thing. Because, we can all learn more, but that stuff is almost like hardwired into us. And so to then build your confidence, build your self-esteem, that takes work, and it takes takes recognition, I guess. Yeah,
you need to accept it.
But I do agree. I think the education system, I do some work at our school, at the kids' school. I scribe for exams and things like that. And I really believe that it's absolutely essential that our neurodivergent children are able to thrive in school and not just survive. And, everybody builds strategies, like when my son, there'd never been any mention of dyslexia. And then his P7 school report, it says oral work far superior to written work. And I was like, light bulb moment. I was like, he's P7. This has never been mentioned before, but he's going to go to high school and he's going to have to write lots more long form stuff. And so we took him to a private person to assess him. And she said, well, yeah, it's not been diagnosed because he's got lots of strategies, but his anxiety levels were getting rising, because effectively he was that duck and he was having to paddle harder and
Yeah.
harder. And as soon as the amygdala, like the fight, flight or freeze part of your brain, starts to kick in, your prefrontal cortex doesn't work properly, because that's the part of your brain that's there to keep you safe. You know, back when we were cave people, a tiger jumps out, your amygdala goes, doo,
Yeah.
and off you go. So you're not, you know, you're then, it's hard
unconscious
to...
almost.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unconscious. So yeah, I would agree with you about the education system. And I think it's a huge opportunity, you know, to make changes. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Labour do with the education system. I think it seems to me that, you know, I was at school a long time ago, clearly, but when we were doing exams, they were phasing out O grades and they were bringing in standard grades, and it was all about there'll be more continual assessment, you know. And here we are, like 30 plus years later, and it still seems to all be about exams. You know, it's like, well, really?
I think the schooling systems remained relatively unchanged for the last like 100, 200 years, but everything else around it has grown and developed.
Yeah.
And also, like, back when I was at school, phones were just becoming a thing. You maybe had like a flip Nokia or something like that. When I was in senior school, there was maybe like the iPod became a thing. But now they all have iPads and they all have laptops and they all have instant access to information. So you can't in business, like, you can't develop, let's say you're buying, but then not develop your financial team around that, or not develop your marketing team. If one grows, the other needs to grow around
or
it. Or
you're only as good as your weakest link.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know why the government haven't, I suppose they've got so many issues right now, it's a very complex issue, but there must be a better way of measuring people to get into university and to get into college than just, did you get an A in English? Did you get a B in, maths? Like when I was at school, photography wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
And I remember talking about specific memories. There was a teacher called Mr. Anderson, and I'm outing him here, but he...
I hope he listens.
Yeah. He said, I remember I was in like P6 and he was doing a game where he was like, there's a survivalist game. You need to show us what your future job's going to be.
Yeah.
And then tell us why that's going to be important for the future. And I said, well, I'm going to be a photographer, and if you kill me, then you're going to kill all the most beautiful photos in the world.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't need you. You're a photographer. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to earn much money. Like, because they were all pushing people towards doctors and lawyers. But I remember that kind of stuck with me.